Hey everybody, this is Michelle.
And this is Julie.
Welcome to A Blonde, a Brunette, and a Mike podcast. What is our podcast all about, you ask?
Well, we're two 50-something women with life experience and, plenty to say.
Which is exactly what we're going to do right now.
All right, well, hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
So have you ever heard of blue zones?
You know, I have, only because recently I was curious about some things and started doing some research. But prior to that, and prior to that, I mean, recently, I didn't know what that was.
Well, blue zones are areas where there's been a lot of research done on lifestyles and people who are living to a very ripe old age. So I don't know if they named it blue zones because you have to have blue hair, you know. In the blue zones, you can have blue hair, but basically everybody in these blue zones that they were studying lived to be at least 100 years old.
Centenarians, as they are known as.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's like, 5 different cities or places across the world.
The world, yeah.
That have these particular zones. So there was a guy who had done this research with National Geographic. His name was Dan Buettner, and he worked with them to determine a formula for longevity. Like, why are these people living so much longer than other people? Because I think the average lifespan for an American, for example, is something like 78 years. Yeah. And I think for women, it's a little bit higher than that. But now
Sorry, guys.
Well,
it just is.
And there's all kinds of reasons why, you know, it has to do with a lot of the things we were talking about in other episodes, you know, with the responsibility and stress level and things of the male in our society. But the blue zones in themselves, it's like, it's really, when I was looking through all of this material, this is so up your alley. Like this particular topic is completely up your alley because it really kind of a natural wonder when you think of these people having lived and the way that they live and how. And, you know, in America, we don't really think this way or you don't see it as a general rule. So,
and this guy, he actually, I mean, he was set out to find, he like scoured the globe for years looking for the places where people live much longer than the average. So that's how this whole blue zone came to fruition. It was through his research. And so there's more, I think there's actually more than 5. Here's some of them. Yeah. Some of the places that they came across. And then what will be cool is there's something called the power of 9, blue zone power 9. It's these 9 concepts or the things that the commonalities that he found with all these places as to how they live their lives and their lifestyles and their connections and all of that kind of stuff. We'll dive into what those things are that they have in common to help them live such long, healthy, gratifying lives.
Right. Well, I think that's the key word right there is gratifying, like they're living happy lives. And there are a few things in here that I'm actually, listeners, taking this topic and I'm really trying to apply it to our societal living in the United States. I mean, what I know is the West Coast. It might be a little different in other parts of the country, of course, but there's so many things about this that, first of all, I step back and I go, okay, when I start looking at all these different things that people are doing to live long lives, I don't think that's the reason why they're doing it. I think that they're potentially living this way because that is their culture. That is the way that they've been raised. That is the way that they've raised probably their families. A lot of it really boils down to more of a simplistic view on life and, you know, shedding a lot of the other crap that's around you.
And it's generational for these places.
Right.
They, you know, multi-generational. Think of the term multi-generational wealth.
Yeah.
And a lot of these places, that wealth for them is the good health.
Yeah.
So I came across this because as of late, I have been very intrigued by the food industry here in the U.S. and we'll be doing some episodes in the future on a lot of the things that I'm coming across with regard to that. But that's how I actually stumbled on this. And it's not, I think it's more well known than probably I was thinking.
Well, it's not something that it's not from around here. There's only one place in the United States that's even on this list.
Yeah. So you're right. There are 5. I was thinking there was more than 5, but you're right, Jules. There's 5. So here are the places that have these centurions and lifestyles in common. Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Icaria, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica.
Yep.
And then to your point, the one place where?
Loma Linda, California.
In California. So these are known as the blue zones with the highest rates of living centurions. So they have more people that live to be over 100 than anywhere else in the world.
That's just crazy.
Isn't it?
Well, the research that you had pulled together indicated that it was last year, there were over 70,000 Americans that actually hit that centurion mark. Do you ever see like is it Al Roker? He does the
weather on channel, isn't it?
No, it's like one of those national programs, Good Morning America. It's one of those.
Yeah,
and they always do like, it's called Pepper. I don't know if it's a Pepperidge Farm thing or something. It's like, it's supported by some company, but they have the 100th birthday for people like listed on there.
I think I have seen that.
Yeah. And, it's kind of cute because you see, you can tell it's like some of them are, in the Midwest, or a lot of them are out in the East Coast that I've seen on there. And it's like these cute little people,
My mom's only 3 years away.
I know.
Isn't that crazy?
I know. Well, your mom's got some good genes.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, what's interesting about that is through this, part of the research is that is not necessarily good genes. Isn't necessarily one of these factors.
Yeah.
So
I think they said something like 20%.
Yes.
What the researcher does, 20% was about your genes, but the other 80% was really about your lifestyle and your environment and your connections.
A plant-based diet is one of them.
I know. Well, so when I was reading this through, I was like, they have meat, like, and this is obviously very general. It's not everybody. Some people probably don't eat meat at all, but like 4 times a month. And it's like the size of your fist, just a small serving. And it would be pork. It wouldn't be beef for sure. Because we know that beef is probably, if you're looking at all the meats, that's the one that has the most fat, whatever. But pork was the one that they had listed as, a meat if someone was going to eat meat. But for the most part, it's plant-based, like you're saying.
Plant-based.
Legumes,
beans.
A
lot of that stuff. That's one of the power of the 9 that we'll get into. But also natural movement. So
no gym.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not lifting weights and pumping iron and all of that stuff.
It's just like daily activity.
Yeah.
So you picture these little, I keep saying little people, but I'm sure they're big people too, I just think of my mom and she's so tiny, and it's like, she's this little old cute person.
Yeah.
But, they're working in their garden.
Yep.
And, they're probably growing some of their food. So they've got natural food with no pesticides and things in them.
Yep.
And my venturing guess is that there's not a lot of sugar, refined sugar by any means, maybe fruit, things like that, but just a really pure, clean diet.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, it sounds kind of boring to me. Maybe as far as I like my ice cream and I like chocolate and all that, but it's like, so I'm thinking, okay, I guess I'm shaving a few years off my life I'm going to have my seltzer and I'm going to have
I feel like they probably have those things, but it's to enjoy, and they do it not indulgently, so that when you do it, and I'm not saying this based on what your habits are or what you do. I just think,
no, let's just say it. let's just call it what it is.
Eating popsicles in bed.
Yeah. Hey, there's sugar-free popsicles, but that means there's chemicals in them.
But I think they do enjoy those things. It's just, again, it's not like every day, all the time. We don't have access to them, down at the corner store, and our freezer's not full of them. So we can just have them whenever we want.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the difference. I don't know. I'm just guessing, but I would venture to guess that that's probably the case. And then also putting family first was another.
So I wanted to talk about that one a little bit, because I have noticed, obviously if you look, you'll see it's like in America, it's very, very different. So I was just recently in Mexico again, and I had actually talked before last year when I was in Mexico with this guy that lived there. He was actually our Uber driver. I was asking him a bunch of questions about elderly people and the homeless population and things like that. And, he had said back then, that was in Cabo, well, we don't have a homeless population here. And I was like, so what do people do if there's mental health issues? He goes, well, their family takes care of them, or they just integrate into society. They do whatever they can to try to take care of themselves, to make some money, whatever the case may be. So there's not like this safety net like that.
They're playing the guitar and selling chiclets on the corner,
and little kids
they're
are
doing
too.
Something.
That's what I'm saying. There's a little hustle going on there.
Yeah.
But what I thought was so interesting was the whole question that I had asked about the elderly, and you see this in every other country. You don't see this here. But I said, do you have retirement homes or convalescent homes, whatever? And he's like, no, we don't.
Can we just talk about that for a second?
Yeah,
I think it's very admirable, and it's actually I think about that because it's very common in a lot of countries. That concept in general, certainly in the 5 that we just mentioned, based on these blue zones, but I think it's really pretty terrific.
Yeah. That
these people generationally have the respect and care for their elderly, and it's expected that would be the case. And why not? I remember my mom moved her parents out. We moved from Minnesota out to Washington, and her parents were elderly and they lived back in Minnesota, and eventually they moved them. They lived with us. And they were able to take care of them until they passed away, which I hope my kids, Drew, Ian, Derek, Isaac.
I know you've had all boys. I hate to say it, but it's like, I'm pretty much banking on Zoe. Although I understood I could move in with him. To your point, we both have elderly moms. They both live independently. And the thought of having my mom live with me seems very odd to me. I feel it, and it's nothing, there's nothing bad. It's just more kind of like, I think about my life being what it is, and I think about, her life being what it is, and they're very different, obviously.
Well, and that's because of how things are here in the West.
Right.
The Western side of the globe. It's very different. It's because it's not, we raise our kids when they're 18. We expect them to move on, move out. They're going to college, get your own place, get your, move on in society and gain your independence. And I have a whole lot of thoughts on that, but we won't get into it in this episode. There's that separation, and then we're going through our midlife empty nest, whole thing. And while they're doing it, and it's very different. I think that too.
It's like you've got your, time when you're working, right? And again, this is from an American perspective.
Yeah.
You're working, you're climbing the corporate ladder, you're trying to, get it's a lot of it's about where, the comfort level of living in the United States. A lot of it has obviously to do with working, and families are not necessarily set up in the same way. You do see some.
There are some,
but not that many.
I think there would be a lot of positive things to gain from that. I know I have an uncle whose family did this. They had kids who they all took turns purchasing each other's homes. Instead of making their own house payment, they all made payments towards one home. They paid it off. And then they went on to the next, paid it off.
So where did they live in the meantime?
In their homes. They were living in their homes. They weren't living all together. But when you come together in family situations like that for the benefit of everybody,
sure,
I think things like that are pretty terrific. It was very beneficial for all of them. They had quite a few children, but they all had their homes paid for.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I have this totally on a side note. I would love to have a compound, not like a commune.
Yeah.
compound.
Yeah.
But a few acres.
Yeah.
Of land where everybody can build their own house and you can have your own space, but we're all kind of in the same place. Anyway, getting back to this. No, because the elderly component of this and how the families kind of gather around their elderly is a very different concept than what we do. And it's not to say that we don't obviously love our parents. We love our parents, but it's kind of a struggle in my mind, trying to figure out what the best approach would be. frankly, we're all pretty independent people. It's like you want to live the way you want to live. And I mean, I'm a single person. It would be kind of weird having my mom live with me.
I think about that though, and we'll get back to the meat of what we're talking about here, but just to what you just said and thinking about that, and yeah, we're independent and we're living soon enough. We'll retire,
right?
And we'll be living our life and doing our things. But then we're going to get to an age where we can't move about as quickly and we can't go out and do like we can now. And what kinds of things are we going to enjoy? Or I just think about these families that do live all together, generations of each other under one roof. And these grandparents, they've got their grandchildren around. So when you think about that and the joy that would bring,
right,
and the longevity, that I can only imagine that does add to the years of your life.
Well, clearly it does, because that's the situation with all of these particular areas that we're talking about here. It's like there are no other options anyway, because they've never created them,
right?
Except maybe in Loma Linda, California, but in the other ones there really isn't. So going back to that conversation I was telling you about with the guy in Mexico, they take care of their elderly people, live with them. They don't have retirement homes. They don't have things like that. And then when I look at in the United States, even having the conversations again with my mom, about retirement living, it's like she looks at it like people are just shoving their elderly in these places and just paying the bill, and that's the end of it. You're just putting me there to die. That's how she looks at it.
I can imagine, not saying your mom, but for an elderly person, I can imagine why it feels that way.
But do you think that also has to do with how that elderly person has really lived their life too? Because if they don't have a big social circle, or they don't have good connections with their family and things like that, then those other options probably aren't even available to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why, if it hasn't come to fruition and been that journey, it's not going to be, as far as being with your family and living with your family and all of that. But I can imagine that is how it would feel.
Yeah.
I know if I'm not very capable and am not capable of doing a whole lot, and I'm just sitting in my home and my health is ailing,
it's depressing.
It is depressing. And, it would probably be a depressing thought for my kids to take that on, and I wouldn't want them to take it on. But again, those things are less apt to happen, like in these places, because they have that human connection all the time, because that's the difference here.
So it starts a lot earlier on than being in your elderly years.
Way earlier on.
So you get into your elderly years here, if you haven't developed a lot of those kinds of connections, or the closeness that you maybe would need to have with your family members or whatever, then there's other options, I guess, available for you.
Right.
I don't know. I think it'd be kind of fun to like be able to just, play cards whenever I wanted, or do whatever I want. But I don't know that I'd want to live in a retirement home.
I don't want to.
I would rather live in my own space, I think. Yeah. Anyway, that's getting off the topic. We digress.
Kind of. So living to be 100, the secrets of these blue zones. Like I said, there's the power of these 9 things. So let's dive into some of those. And I know we already touched on this, but one of them is moving naturally.
Right.
So what is that?
So things like, gardening and walking, and just like daily life, and not having the conveniences necessarily of daily life to be making your life easier. They just, kind of go about their day the same way that they did, do the same things that they did. I think one example I was reading about was this lady who was saying that she didn't want to use the newfangled coffee pots with the little
Keurig.
Yeah, like the Keurigs like we have. She wanted to use a French press, because that's what, it's the process. It's kind of the whole ritual, or the process of creating the coffee in the morning, and just, enjoying that process. And it's like, I wouldn't switch that either if that was something that you enjoyed doing, even if it is an old fashioned thing. Who cares?
Right.
If you like it, who cares?
Well, and these people in these places, they live in environments that are continually promoting healthy, natural movement. So
Right.
not a lot of modern conveniences when it comes
Right.
to your point, like you said earlier, they are gardening and they don't have mechanical conveniences for like housework and yard work.
Like mowing the lawn and stuff.
Yeah. So they probably use clippers and not an edger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's good exercise and it gets you. The other day, I washed my car in the driveway.
I know.
And I didn't just
I
drive
almost
through.
rolled mine in when I saw you.
Yeah, I know. But that was my thought when I did it. I was like, I could go roll through Brown Bear or whatever, Aloha, but $20 or whatever. And I thought, you know what? It's a beautiful day. We've got the hose.
Mm-hmm.
It's good exercise. I'm just going to wash my car.
Yep.
But, things like that we just don't even think about.
My venturing guess is that they don't really have Amazon go to these different places.
Maybe the California one, but
Yeah.
probably not.
That's like, I'm all about those modern conveniences, making my life simple, So things like Amazon make it easy for me. The one thing that I had, this is where when I talk with people that are elderly, again, Americans, not obviously from these other areas, the one thing that I've noticed is that the sense of purpose is gone or is lost or there's no grasp on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that leads to other things like depression or, isolating yourself or really just like what the heck am I even here for? I mean, you definitely have heard that. I've heard that from people. So having a sense of purpose is something that in these 5 blue zones that they talk about. And isn't there a name for it? Well,
there's a couple of them that have the Okinawans call it ikigai.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's how you say it, but that looks like how it would be pronounced. And the Nicoyans call it plan de vida.
That's in Costa Rica.
Yeah. So both of those translates, and I'm just going to read this because I love the way the statement is.
Mm-hmm.
It's why I wake up in the morning knowing your sense of purpose is worth up to 7 years of extra life expectancy.
Wow. I totally can see that.
I'm just going to say that again. Let me say it again. Knowing your sense of purpose is worth up to 7 years of extra life expectancy.
Yep.
I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that you can struggle with at times. It doesn't matter where you are in your life, but especially when you are getting into those elderly years and you have to rely on other people and you don't really know if you don't know what you're giving back, if you don't know why you're there, maybe you're there to teach your grandchildren, maybe you're there to show people how to cultivate, whatever the garden is, who knows, but if you don't have that sense of purpose, it's kind of like, why am I waking up in the morning?
Yeah.
What's the point in what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And again, I feel like that leads to a lot of the depression and isolation and things that make the time that people are here not great.
Right.
So yeah, having a sense of purpose, very important. The other thing about these zones is that, everybody deals with stress.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all deal with it differently too, but the one consistency in these zones is that there's outlets for people to be able to shed stress. Now, I don't know if their level of stress is what I would consider stressful or whether you'd consider it stressful. For them, it's stressful because their life it's less complicated maybe in some ways because they've chosen to have it be less complicated, but there's still stress. I mean, there's still, things that happen within your family or bills or whatever. I don't know what, I'm just thinking of the things we deal with.
Yeah.
But some of the ways that you can give yourself permission to deal with those things are just really simple, like taking a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the Italians, Sardinia, the Italians are like all about the nap and
the happy hour.
Yeah.
Happy hour.
Yeah. We're about happy hour. That makes us happy.
The Japanese, the Okinawans take a few moments every day to remember their ancestors.
Yeah.
Which I think is spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was actually just thinking about that this morning. I thought, in 100 years, there's people aren't even going to know who I am.
I know.
Or who I was or what I did.
Yeah. What kind of legacy do you leave? You leave it within your children who leave it within their children. But think about it. I mean, if you try to look back on your family tree 100 years ago, it's like, I don't know those people.
Yeah.
And I mean, I might know some names or things, but there's probably a lot of people that we don't know.
Right.
So my venturing guess is that when people are moving on into the next realm of of existence, that their whole family knows who they are. And
they talk about them.
Yeah.
They know them because they've been living with them. They grow up with them.
Yeah.
They grow old with them.
They grow old with them. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that, for sure.
Yeah.
This other one that has to do with food, it's like we were talking about the plant-based diets, and a lot of it is probably grown, there. So there's not pesticides and things in their food and things you might run across in our society. Well, Michelle has been on this major kick about the foods. It's kind of scary, really.
Yeah.
And it's something we're trying to figure out how we can bring to you guys, because there's so much information, and it's almost a little frightening, some of the things you see. But anyway, separate topic altogether. But bottom line is these folks eat healthy.
Yes.
They eat healthy. And have you heard of the 80% rule?
I actually have heard of that before.
Yeah, it's a Weight Watchers
and that's
rule.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. It's like, it's kind of that's where I remember hearing about it.
Though. Yeah.
So why don't you share what the 80% rule is?
It means that before meals, and these are what some of these people do, is to remind yourself that you should stop eating when your stomach is 80% full. So I don't know how you know what the 80% is.
I'll tell you.
Okay.
Well, this is what
do share
the little trick.
Okay.
So, when you're having a meal or whatever, you're starting to eat, you're hungry, whatever, obviously you want to eat slower, because when you eat fast, your stomach doesn't know that you're full. But there's a point that you don't even notice it, but there's a point where you pause and maybe set your fork down or get a drink of water or something like that. That is your 80% mark, where you're pausing, because you're not eating with the same vigor that you were before. You kind of pause, and it's your body's way of telling you. I'd learned that a long time ago. So whenever I pause and I realize I'm pausing, I'm like, well, there's still food here and I'm hungry. And so I'll consciously make that choice to eat the rest of my food.
Of course, because it tastes good.
Right.
I literally have said that so many times. I'm like, I'm really not hungry anymore. I'm eating this because it tastes so good.
Right.
Just can't help myself.
Well, you're ignoring the 80% rule, which is fine. I mean, sometimes you're going to overindulge, and that's no big deal. But I mean, think about some of our holidays like Thanksgiving. I mean, people are like beached whales sleeping on the couch, and then they're going for round 2, after the football game. And, it's just overeating is such a common thing that we run across.
Well, and all the time.
All the time.
We eat all the time.
And the stuff that we're eating isn't necessarily always that great for you.
No,
so
there's so much that's not.
Yeah. So, because I don't think obesity is an issue in any one of these areas.
Nope, it sure isn't.
No, none of them. None of the stuff that relates to obesity.
And these people in the blue zones eat their smallest meal in the late afternoon or early evening. Yeah. And then they don't eat anymore for the rest of the day.
Yeah. They're doing intermittent fasting without even realizing it. Well, it kind of makes sense.
Well, you're going to go to sleep. That's when, and they're eating healthy and all this good stuff. Their body is probably
80% full.
The right stuff, the melatonin that your body produces naturally, in the evening. And that's where stuff throws it off. You start eating sugar and ice cream and whatever in the evening. And then your body's like, wait, do I need to start producing sugar? And, there goes the melatonin, and then you're wide awake, and it's just crazy.
80% rule it's a good one to follow.
I think that's great.
Yeah. Also, audience, as we're talking about all these things, it is something that we kind of challenge you to hear what we're talking about and seeing how these folks are successful, not like they're trying to be successful, but their lifestyle is very successful because they're living a happier, healthy, more simplistic life in a lot of ways, very which fulfilling. We don't really have.
Yeah.
We have to really consciously do that here, I think.
So we want y'all to move your parents in and start eating beans.
Yeah. And you can drink wine. Definitely drink wine every day. That's one thing that they're talking about.
You can see how complicated it all seems. So it's very interesting, though, because, you throw that out there like I just did, and it all, and like we were talking about, just moving your parents in, it seems all so complicated because of the way we live our life here. And for them, it's not complicated at all. No. It's very simplistic. It's very healthy, fulfilling, and, they've got this longevity to their lives, which is pretty incredible. So anyways, but that being said, number 5 with this power of 9 is something called plant slant, which is beans, black soy, and lentils are the cornerstone of most of these centenarian diets. And like you were talking about before, meat is mainly pork average eaten only 5 times a month.
Yeah.
And in small portions.
Yeah.
So
plant-based.
Yeah.
See, and
moderation, which is really what we should be doing anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that. And I really like that this 80% rule thing makes a lot of sense, because we, as a general rule, I think, and I can't speak for other countries, but I can for ours, it's like we overeat like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we're overeating, and we're overeating with, food that's not necessarily good for us to begin with. And so we're creating a lot of the problems. The one thing that I was thinking about that I didn't see or get into was, if the centenarians that they were, analyzing and kind of, were in this study, if they took medication, like if there was like thyroid medication, or there was medication for cholesterol or things like that, or did they even need any of that stuff?
Right.
Yeah. So I'd be kind of curious to know.
Probably, I don't know. I would venture to guess not a lot of that.
Not a lot of medications.
Not needed when you think of how their lifestyles are. This is why they're living to be 100.
Right.
So,
I don't know if I'd want to live to be 100.
If I was healthy.
If you were healthy.
If I was healthy, that's a combination between healthy and happy.
Michelle's healthy.
If you're healthy, if you're happy, what's not to live for?
I think the thought that scares me the most is being incapacitated in some capacity.
Yeah.
Like not being able to do things for myself, or and I mean, as saying this out loud, so hopefully it won't come true, is I, for whatever reason, am totally freaked out about Alzheimer's. Maybe it's because I'm very forgetful as a general rule, but it's like, I think about that all the time.
Do you know that wasn't even a thing until the late 80s?
Well, see, that's the whole thing. It's like, where is this coming from? And it's so common.
It's associated with food.
Yeah.
It is.
So another thing to put on the back burner.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So more plant-based diet. But, the other thing too is that in all of these blue zones, with the exception of people that don't drink, they were saying that like 1 to 2 glasses of wine a day is actually good for you.
Moderately and regularly.
Yeah. I kind of like that.
Moderate drinkers. Are you ready for this? In the blue zones, moderate drinkers outlive the non-drinkers. The trick is to drink 1 to 2 glasses a day. So
I wonder if it's just like red wine.
And then there's a key there, is to do it with friends or with food. So you're not just like having a drink at home by yourself.
Yeah. Sitting there watching Fox News oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, just like with friends, food.
So it's the interaction.
Yes. And you can't like save it up all week and have like 12 drinks on Friday night. That's not the concept. It's like 1 to 2 moderately every day throughout the week with friends and food.
So it's a very it's a very social thing.
Absolutely.
But see, that goes back to the connections. Yeah. Yes, because if you don't have the connections, then that puts you in a place where you're isolated. So
true.
But that has been a consistency with all of these blue zones as well.
Yeah.
So the family first, we kind of talked about, that is the priority. Your family comes first. And we always say that, you always are going to take care of your family. It's just the versions of how these areas take care of them might be different than other areas, or there's not as much. It's just the way it is. It's not like there's options. I guess that's just kind of how they live. They obviously have the people living with them and things like that. And, like I had my Aunt Sarah Garcia, she just passed away a year ago, or not quite a year ago. And she was 103. And she has 4 daughters that are here. And she's the cutest little tiny lady. Oh my gosh. And the daughters would take turns and each have her for 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
She has a house that's been sitting empty forever. And she's like, can I go home? Can I go home? Yeah. And then she kind of stopped asking because I think she just forgot. But she's been very lovingly taken care of by her daughters. They take her everywhere. They would feed her. I mean, she's just darling. And I can't even imagine her being in a situation where she would be in a retirement home. or something like. She didn't even speak really that much English.
Yeah.
You know, so I just can't even imagine
Right.
how that could have. First of all, if that would have ever even happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I doubt it. I mean, I can't even. There's no way.
One of the statistics for people living in these blue zones,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to having grandparents either nearby
Mm-hmm.
or in the home, is that it lowers the mortality rates of children.
Of children?
That are in the home as well.
Oh, wow.
I just think it's pretty cool, the connection there with the family.
Mm-hmm.
And also it can add up to 3 years of life expectancy.
Well, there you go.
I know.
That gets them over 100.
So investing that time with the children as an elderly person, it's just going to mean that they're more likely to take care of you.
Right.
As what, like when they get old and their kids, it's that whole generational thing
Mm-hmm.
that they see happening over and over and over again with these families. So definitely, like you said, loved ones first.
Yeah.
Family first.
Yeah. And then that kind of extends off into your tribe, you know, your people that are your inner circle. And, you know, these folks, obviously, as they've gotten older, probably a lot of people in their lives that are not part of their family, but, you know, they're out there. When I say inner circle, I'm talking not relatives, but, you know, like your inner circle,
Right.
have started passing away too. So that's what a lot of folks that are getting into their 90s and such are experiencing, because their tribe, if you will, or their friend group is starting to pass away.
Uh-huh.
You know, I mean, my mom has talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Probably your mom too.
That's like my mom. She's like the last one.
Yeah.
There in the community.
That would be a very
That's her
isolating
age.
feeling.
Yeah.
So then you have to kind of get out and develop new connections, which is very difficult to do when you're not ambulatory, or, you know, you're not driving even.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be hard to connect with other people, especially if you're not really in tune with some of the modern day conveniences that are social media or Zoom or whatever. You know, that's not something that a lot of people will even entertain.
Do you know something else too? And I think this is going to be 9. This last one is that most of these, they interviewed almost 300 of these centenarians, right? And of the ones they interviewed, most of them belong to a faith-based community of some kind. Denomination doesn't really matter, but they were a part of some type of, like I said, faith-based community.
Right. It was like a staggering number, like 98% or something.
And attending a service, they attended services at least 4 times a month. And guess what the statistic is on that? It will extend life expectancy 4 to 14 years.
Really?
Yes.
So do you think that has something to do with that particular generation, though? The people that are 100 years old are living in the way that they were living, you know, in 1820, whatever.
I know you want it to be old people, Jules, but they're bringing up their kids the same way.
I know, but I know. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying I don't want it or want it. I don't care. I obviously did it for my family too. Yeah. But you know how it carries on in the next generations and stuff. Does it continue to carry on when you get into second generation, third generation?
I think it does in these communities, because all of these things that we were just discussing, all 9 of these things in these blue zones are all things that they have in common. It's what they do. It's how they live their life. So I think it's not like they know it's not like here in the Western America.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I've been struggling with this a little bit, trying to envision.
Yeah.
I almost want to go, okay, so one of these places is in Costa Rica, and you know I want to go to Costa Rica. Yeah. It's like I'm very curious.
Aren't you going?
No, not yet.
Oh,
not yet. I will be going,
okay.
But I don't know when yet.
You know what? This will actually be pretty cool. When you do go, you can like check this out.
I have to go check this out
for sure,
because I'm very curious about it, and I think it is probably when you think about life being more simplistic, there are things maybe that you notice more or that are more special, you know, that take place, or like things that are day to day that to us would be like, wow, that's so cool. But it's like they don't know any different because they do it the same way all the time.
Right.
You know, interactions with their family, the like faith-based communities that you're talking about, the way that they eat, the way that they give themselves the ability to alleviate stress. And again, whatever. I mean, everybody has a different threshold for things like that. I don't know what a centurion stress level would be,
right.
But I'm sure everybody has it. So,
sure.
It's just a matter. And those are things that you have to practice.
Got to do that downshift.
The downshift, yeah. Well, I mean, it's like they
the happy hour.
They didn't just become 100.
Right.
They've been, leading up to that. So they've been living their life our age, or whatever, up to that point in this way. And that's how they've gotten to where they're at.
What's interesting? I'm just sitting here thinking about when I was young, we had a great big backyard. And one day my dad got a rototiller and tilled up half of our backyard and made it into a garden. So I'm just wondering if he thought about some of these things, made a garden, we grew a garden and did all that stuff. And then when we moved to Washington, he bought 50 acres so that if any of us wanted to build out there, we could all live out there.
Did you?
No, nobody did.
It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, right?
Nobody did. That's what I'm saying. It's like, here, to your point, it's like the next generation.
Yeah.
Here in America, it's very different. It's not going to carry these things on. So,
well, they might carry them on, but they carry them on differently. Whereas what you see here is kind of tradition.
Yeah.
And it's very cultural, I'm sure, in those particular areas. If you go outside of Sardinia, you might not run into the same issues or the same way of life that you do in that particular area. I mean, there's centurions all over the place. So, but this seems to be where the bulk of people that have those commonalities, not just age, but the way that they live are in these particular areas. Yeah. So it'd be cool to expand them.
I know. If you're interested, maybe you listeners have heard of the Blue Zones before and you're 10 steps ahead of us, but it was a new concept for me or one, I guess it was, I enjoyed learning about the research that they did, how they came up with this stuff and the things that they found in these 5 areas with regard to longevity.
I think there's a lot of things that we
and
can.
Quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I think there's a lot of things that we can learn. You don't necessarily want to take all of these things and apply them to your life, but there might be a few things in there that you would learn that would help make your life a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, well, hey, are we on the socials?
We're on all the socials.
Yeah.
Yep. We're on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. All the socials.
Yay.
I don't know about that X thing. We haven't dove into that.
No, I'm not an X girl.
Me neither.
No.
Me neither. So all the other socials, though, we are out there. So just take a lookie, share, follow.
And have a good one.
Yeah.
Peace out, people.
Till next time, everybody. Bye.
Have a good one.